Hello, and welcome to Everyday Tarot, your daily dive into the divine wisdom of the tarot. I'm your host, Camille A. Saunders, and today I'll be talking about tarot in pop culture. Whether you're a seasoned tarot reader or just starting to explore, this podcast offers daily insights, intuitive messages, and practical advice drawn from the cards. Each episode is designed to help you connect with your inner wisdom, find clarity in your decisions, and tap into the energy of the universe. Tune in every day, Monday through Friday, for fresh perspectives and empowering guidance from the tarot as interpreted by me. So, for our main discussion today, I'm going to be talking about where you have seen tarot kind of show up in pop culture. I have a couple different examples I'm going to get into. I'll probably just kind of touch in on those. These are all pretty recent ones, like in the last year or two, if they're TV shows or video games. And then I have two that are a little bit older. But these are all things that I've seen, watched, or read, or participated in, or seen the game of. There's lots of examples of tarot in pop culture, but I figured I'd sort of talk about some of the depictions in these, and then sort of like the overall themes that I see when tarot is depicted in media. And I do plan to have a whole season of my show dedicated to doing like a whole pop culture season. So spending a whole episode talking about one show episode or one video game that talks about tarot or one movie and how it depicts it. Because I think that's really cool. And again, it's an interesting breakdown because I feel like how tarot is often depicted is sort of goes into these like stereotypes or sort of the perception of tarot, as I talked about last episode. So today I'm going to be talking about some TV shows, some movies, and some video games. And these are not necessarily in order of when they came out, but I'm just going to get into it. They were the order that I thought of them in. So the first one I'm going to talk about is The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. I know this show was out a couple of years ago. It has multiple seasons. There's a lot of witchcraft in it, and tarot. There's like a particular episode where tarot sort of came up. So in the fourth episode of part 2 of The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, it has like an hour-long format. So the first part of the episode talked about, it was the fifth episode, Dreams in the Witch House, which showed the characters sort of having individual nightmares framed by a dream demon that was preying on them. And that was Dr. Cerberus's House of Horrors, and it's made up of like short, character-specific, horror-filled segments that were each framed through a tarot card reading. And so it's sort of like each of the characters again like goes and like has a card read for them, and then sort of each of their dreams that play out in this episode are these like nightmares. And again, this like dream demon is like using like the themes of the cards as sort of a very literal interpretation of like what could happen to them. So in this depiction, I'd say the cards generally like fit to the stories that unfold. Most of them seem to be chosen though for more like the visual cues over maybe like how I would interpret their meaning. But yeah, so there is a tarot reader in the show called Mrs. McGarvey, and they describe the cards, and then the witches sort of react to them in the moment, and you see sort of like the tarot reading scene, and then later you see these sort of like dream demon things. So, like, for example, Sabrina, like, she gets 3 cards pulled for her, actually. So she gets the Magician, the Tower reversed, and the 3 of Swords. And in the show, they sort of get interpreted okay. Like, the Magician card, they talk about, like, a literal magician, her, like, boyfriend, Nick. That's sort of what they associate it with, but also this, like, resourcefulness or putting a plan into action. There is sort of this like manipulation part of it. The next card pulled is the Tower Reversed, which it says that Miss McGarvey doesn't really comment on. And again, as I talked about in my Perception of Tarot episode, the Tower cards usually seems pretty ominous. It's often like a literal tower with people falling off of it, which is what's presented in the episode as well. And usually it's like upheaval, change, perhaps disastrous. Um, but reversed, it's sort of like, okay, that already happened, and maybe you're growing from that. Things are changing. Um, and it sounds like, yeah, for that particular episode, it kind of makes sense. Like in the show, Sabrina sort of starts going to this like dark side of like witchcraft, um, and it sounds like sort of like, okay, like made a change. And thinking about that, the last card she pulls or gets pulled for her is the Three of Swords, which in the show they like associate that with the three weird sisters. Um, that are in the show, and sort of what they talk about. Generally, the Three of Swords is seen as sort of more like heartbreak, emotional pain. Generally, if you look at the card again in the traditional Rider-Waite-Smith like depiction, it's usually like a heart that's sort of like dripping blood with three swords like plunged through it. Um, and yeah, so in this episode, it sort of talks about heartbreak, but they more associate it with like a literal interpretation of like the three weird sisters and that they're coming after her boyfriend, Nick, at the time. Um, yeah, so I'd say it's like a pretty good fit for her. Like the interpretation seems to be pretty good. I know on the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina TV show, they did have real witches consult on the show. It is supposed to be sort of like a satirical take on like witchcraft or sort of like witches in real life and sort of like what it could look like in day to day life, but also taken to an extreme. So sort of keep that in mind. Um, but they did. I'm like, I do appreciate the fact that they like there are aspects of the show that like I would say feel accurate, or they have festivals or things like that in the show that are like pagan traditional festivals and that kind of thing. So okay, so that one depiction's okay, not like amazing, and I would say it's still pretty ominous. But a bunch of characters in that episode get different cards. All right, so the next sort of pop culture um, thing I've talked about recently or seen in last year is Balatro, the card game. So it's sort of like poker. It's like played like a video game, I'd say, like on a computer, on your phone, or that kind of thing. People are really obsessed with it. I know multiple people that play it, they really like it. And it actually uses tarot cards in it. I would say it sort of uses tarot cards like not like at all traditional tarot cards. So it sort of has like normal quote unquote like deck of cards, and then they have tarot cards that have like specific actions or they mean different things. So I actually went through and my boyfriend like asked me the other day about specific like what does this tarot card mean like for you in reality, and then like what does it do in the game. And I would say like the visuals of it are cool in the game. I think people really like that aspect of it. There's this element of like getting new packs of cards all the time that you do. So you get to see like different images. But I would say most of like the meanings of the cards or sort of the actions that they create in the game don't really have anything to do with like my understanding of tarot. I would say again they're sort of picking like the visual of it as like priority and then using it to just sort of separate itself from like a traditional card deck card game for poker. Um, and that's not one that I actually play, but I've heard a lot about it this year. I talked to multiple people about it, and I have like seen the game because my boyfriend plays it a lot, so I see it up on his computer and some of the cards there, and we've talked about it. Let's see. I know in the TV show Twin Peaks, which is not new at all, came out, I believe, in the 90s. I have watched most of it, not the when it came back. I will watch that as well. But there is tarot in Twin Peaks. Again, it's sort of associated with like evil characters, I would say. I think both Blackie and John Renault. are shown reading cards um, as a character in the show. They don't really like touch on it, but both of those characters are sort of seen as like bad or evil or just sort of like manipulative of the characters, the protagonists that we sort of like in the show. So again, not like a great depiction, but it's sort of interesting that they like utilize it, I would say almost to like indicate some like deviousness or something like that. But I don't even think they like talk about it. I think it's literally just shown in scenes that they like are reading cards in a scene, or like when we pan in on them, they have tarot cards. Um, I have a couple more I'm going to talk about. And I will probably do a whole season on this, so get ready. But in Harry Potter, so there's sort of divination in general, which I'd say in the books is depicted as sort of like ridiculous, like a scam. Like Harry and Ron are not really into it ever. They go to divination because they have to. Hermione is very skeptical, hates it, feels like it's a waste of time. And I feel like that's sort of like the author's point of view. Um, and she like leaves the class and doesn't come back. Like doesn't like chooses not to participate in the class because she thinks it's so poor. Which is fascinating that at like a magical school, there's like still all this hate on like divination. Um, but one interesting thing that does happen, so there's lots of different instances where like divination in general comes up, less so of tarot, but there is one that I thought was interesting. So in the sixth book, Trelawney, who's the divination teacher, like talks to Dumbledore and keeps saying, like, says that she kept finding the lightning struck tower card in her readings, no matter how she laid them out. And she sort of interprets this as like bad things are about to happen or like calamity. I think like she doesn't talk about if it's reversed or not, but it sounds like it's upright. So sort of the traditional like something's going to happen, a big transformation happen. Um, and that card in the tarot deck, and then what happens at the end of the sixth book, which, spoilers, if you haven't read Half-Blood Prince, spoiler warning, but Dumbledore dies, and he falls off or gets blasted off a tower, the astronomy tower, which I believe is the tallest tower in the castle. So interesting that, again, there's sort of this, like, literal interpretation of like we have the divination teacher, she's pulling the tower card over and over. She like doesn't understand why she keeps pulling it. She like tells Dumbledore, I think in sort of like a passing comment. And then at the end of the book we get this like tower moment where Dumbledore is killed, he gets blasted off the tower, and sort of like everything changes, especially at the school and Harry's life. Like they go on the run afterwards. So there is this sort of like, I guess, like stays true, I would say, to the sort of like idea of the tower card, which is like calamity or sort of like transformation through catastrophe, which I would say does kind of happen. Like Harry then has to go out like and figure out things on his own with his friends. Like they don't have support anymore. Like they leave school. Like there's a lot of like calamity type of things that happen. But there's also this sort of like literal, like she pulls a tower and then he falls off the tower. So again, sort of going with like the visual of it, but just like an interesting thing that happens in the book. And there's lots of divination things that are not tarot but that come true in the book, even though they're almost always described by the characters as like not real or ridiculous. So yeah, I'm probably going to do a whole season on the various types of divination in Harry Potter and sort of like how it's depicted and some of the things that get predicted and then come true, despite the characters saying that it's a scam and nothing's true about it. All right. The next one I'm going to talk about is there was a movie that came out in 2024. I think it's just called Tarot, but it's a horror movie. This one I have not seen. I don't really like horror movies. It's about tarot loosely. But again, it's sort of kind of maybe how it's depicted in Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, where it's like people pull cards as like a fun thing, and then later on, like all those cards sort of like come true in a death correspondence way. So I'll read a bit of the description for you and then talk about like the specific cards that they pull. So it's like the general idea is like college friends rent a mansion in the Catskills for someone on their birthday. They like that things are awkward, and so they're like trying to lighten the mood. And one of them, like I guess, like reads horoscopes with a strange old box of tarot cards that they discover in the basement, which sounds truly like the beginning of a lot of horror movies. And so the different characters, like someone gets the high priestess, someone gets the hermit, someone gets the hanged man, someone gets the magician, someone gets the fool, someone gets the devil, and then I think sort of our like main character gets the death card. And then I think they all die from what I understand, and they all like each of their deaths sort of correspond to like the cards that they get. So again, not what I've actually seen. Sounds again like a pretty literal interpretation of the cards. So not again saying that like, oh, that like the hermit is that you're sort of like hibernating or you're going out to a place and pulling away from society for a bit to maybe become introspective or get away or some escapism, but that like a part of like the hermit card is sort of like what happens to the character in like a again that they die in this way. Almost sounds very like Final Destination, but just with tarot. So again, this really sort of like adds on or just continues the perception of tarot in pop culture that tarot is like evil or like inherently predictive of the future, that you can't like escape it, and that like it all has to do with death or like this evil type of thing. And the last one I'm going to talk about is, I would say, like again, a little bit better of a what's the right word? Like showing of tarot in Agatha All Along, which is a Marvel conglomerate, came after WandaVision. And they leaned fully into like they did a whole episode basically on tarot. So one of the characters is a tarot reader. One of like the main characters is a tarot reader. And they're sort of they have to go through these different trials for an end goal, and one of the trials is based on this tarot reader's like powers of divination. So it's sort of like they're stuck in this like they're literally in a room and there's all these swords on the ceiling, and every time they like do something wrong, one of the swords like falls and can like kill them, but they don't really know where they're gonna like fall at the time. And so there's all this like, oh, you have to do it the right way. They try to do it. Again, I guess these are spoilers for Agatha All Along, so if you want to watch it and you haven't yet, maybe stop now. But um, that someone tries to read, they think someone is the one that should be reading the cards at first. And they try to do it, and then some of these swords fall and it's wrong. And it's interesting because, like, right, the usage of swords is sort of like in tarot, there's a suit of swords and then minor arcana, and swords can be like decision making, decisive, sometimes like a dangerous journey. So that's kind of, they're kind of playing on that like symbolism there. Um, and like the Witch's Road, which is this like trial that they're going through, is like a treacherous path. It's some people have died. It's revealed epic secrets. So it also sort of gives like the audience like a crash course on tarot card reading. So there's like a very dramatic scene where Lilia, who's the tarot reader, she like places her cards down and they're like drawn squares on the table, and she starts reading like for each of the other characters that's there at the time, and sort of interpreting live as it goes. Um, and yeah, for the most part, I think the meanings are fairly accurate. They do line up with like the standard interpretations. Again, I'll probably of all these pop culture things I talked about to like a whole episode on each one. So I'm not going to get too much into like the specific cards. But yeah, I'm going to do a whole season on pop culture in the future because I think that sounds really fun and sort of really get into like what's the perception of tarot? How is it sort of shown in the media in a particular way? And then like does it feel accurate or does it feel sort of like um, a good representation of tarot? And I think with the ones I talked about today, it kind of runs the gamut. We have a straight horror movie called Tarot. We have it used in sort of like a witchy shows like Chilling Adventures of Sabrina and Agatha All Along. And then we also have it in other shows that I guess are also all fairly related to like witchcraft or like Harry Potter or Twin Peaks, which is not necessarily witchcraft, but sort of like supernatural. And then in the Balatro card game, which is different and sort of like poker game, um, but also like uses tarot cards as like a visual effect in the game. And like I said, in the upcoming season, I'm going to deep dive into each of these pop culture references and do an episode on each one. And I'm probably going to do a whole season on Harry Potter because there's different kind of divination things depicted in the book, and tarot is usually seen as a form. Tarot is considered cartomancy, which is usually under a form of divination, and talk about what cards are depicted, the portrayal, if it feels accurate, like I said. So get excited for that in the future. But yeah, let's dive in and see what the cards have to say today. All right, so today I'm pulling from the Sasser Ibito Tarot by Stasia Burrington. And I pulled two cards, but the first one is the Knight of Wands, and both cards were upright today. So the Knight of Wands generally has a theme of like energetic, charming, self-confident, maybe risky. There's an image of a guy on this card. He's looking kind of confident. He looks like you think he's pretty charming. And let's see what it says in the book. The Knight of Wands is seductive and disarming, and they know it. They're adventurous and spontaneous with contagious energy. They want to be in the middle of the action, danger be damned. He's a man of action and signifies that your creative endeavors are going full speed ahead. So again, this is a knight, which is one of sort of the later cards in the suit. It goes ace through 10, and then knight, or page, knight, queen, king, and then it moves on to the next suit. So we're getting sort of towards the end, and generally the knight, queen, and king cards are seen as like more bold or impactful or just sort of like stronger. So again, this card's kind of saying there's like spontaneous, contagious energy, wanting to be in the middle of the action, something going on there, getting excited about it, and that kind of thing. So think about what that might relate to in your life right now. And then the second card I pulled is the Ten of Pentacles. And it is also upright. When I look at it, it shows, looks like two people sort of doing acro yoga, so doing like yoga together. One person's sort of like bent over, and the other person's like kind of like laying across them upside down, and then there's a dog perched on top of them. Like it looks very balanced and like they're in symbiosis. And then there's 10 kind of circles depicted for the 10 of Pentacles. So this card is related to wealth, success, and stability. It's a card of great fortune and prosperity. It commonly shows a nuclear family, affluent and secure. They said the author has illustrated a somewhat silly ideal to me, grouping of a couple plus canine companion finding strength and balance. The card signifies having made it materially and enjoying stability and comfort. As the 10 in the suit of Pentacles, this card comes after trials, hardship, work, and effort, and in the end, result of a material journey. So again, Pentacles generally seen as like things in the material world, earth, like grounded things. As such, it can indicate retirement or settling down. This is also a card of convention and conservatism, finding security, and of course, wanting things to remain the same. This card underscores the value of family, extended and adopted, and tradition. Fully enjoy the space and recognize that your success, while in part because of you, is also due to something bigger. And this deck actually has quotes at the end. So I'm going to read that quote as well. Not for every card, but it does for this one. It says, "Walking, I am listening to a deeper way. Suddenly, all my ancestors are behind me. Be still, they say. Watch and listen. You are the result of the love of thousands." And that quote is from Linda Hogan, a Native American author, as quoted in the book. All right. So thanks for joining me today on Everyday Tarot. Just as a reminder, the podcast will come out daily, Monday through Friday, for all of 2025. If you ever want to see the cards that I pulled, the images of them, or the tarot decks, those will be linked in the show notes and on my website if you want to look at them or to purchase the decks. And all right, I'll see you soon. Bye bye.